Panel. My name is Doug Johnson. I am a director at an organization called IDinsight. So since we're a little bit smaller than probably less well known than some of these other organizations, let me just give a brief introduction to IDinsight. So IDinsight, we're an organization, we're based here in Delhi. Our mission is to help leaders in government and the social sector make better decisions using data. So that's, I mean, data is really core to our mission. And we're very, some of the ways we do this, just to give you a few examples, we will work with a nonprofit organization to help them conduct a randomized control trial to look at whether one version of their program is better than another version of their program. We work with nonprofits also to help them design ways to collect and analyze data. We work with the government. A good example is aspirational districts to provide analytical support, data collection. And I should confess before I start making my comments, I'm definitely not an expert, much less of an expert than I think these many of the other panelists here on open data, but we do use a lot of data. We use data in sometimes in kind of boring ways, you know, to design surveys. You know, if you're doing an evaluation, you're doing a survey, you need to understand the parameters of how a variable changes at the district level versus village level and the variance and things like that. Those parameters are critical to doing good data collection. Let me tell you, I'll briefly mention a couple of reasons why I'm really excited about the direction India is taking in open data. And then I'll mention there's already been like a few really good suggestions. I had a couple of additional ones on how we can maximize the potential of open data. So I see three big benefits of open data. One is, you know, whenever you're making open source anything, you make it higher quality because you know somebody's going to be looking at that. And that's just a sort of a external scrutiny factor. Anytime you know somebody's going to be looking at your code, you're looking at your data, there is an impetus to not be, to make sure you put a little bit more effort in. A second big benefit of open data is it just, you get this free external support from outside researchers who are super interested in the topic and will take this data and they'll scrutinize it. They'll look for things like camels in Tamil Nadu, but they'll also do like really cool things like looking for, you know, anomalies in transport data in Delhi, and then hopefully actually develop apps using the OTT data. So you get this free labor. A third benefit I think for the government is, the government is a big entity in any country, right? You know, and just from my own personal example, I worked for the U.S. federal government a little while ago, and in a pretty data-heavy role. The vast majority of the data that I used was not shared directly from another agency. I went directly to the sources that external resources were using to obtain data, and I obtained it through those mechanisms. So even within the government, making it public increases the use, I think. So I think those three things are reasons why I'm really optimistic of the potential of open data. I had, as a data user, a frequent data user, I had a couple of comments, and it'd be interesting, as a non-expert, I'd be really curious to hear what others on this panel have to say about this. One quick comment is, we often, going back to the license issue, it would be really helpful if more government data had a permissive license which allowed people to download, reshare that data. For example, we've scraped numerous government data sets. We've probably got like half of NREGA data. We've got half of the UDICE data, the education data. We're reluctant to set up a website. And often, for example, we are primarily economists. Economists use data using certain software systems. It kind of like reduces the fixed cost of parsing and using the data if we can just share it with other economists directly. We've always been a little bit reluctant to do that because the legality of that is a little bit unclear for us. Maybe that's just because you don't have a legal background. But having that permissive license to do that, I think would be helpful. I think the knock-on consequence of that is that in some cases, it might be other organizations kind of getting the lion's share of the credit for making data public, which I guess the government has to be comfortable with. For example, in the US, everybody assumes that weather.com and other private companies are the ones collecting weather data, where it's all government data. And they just format it really nicely and put it on a website. They don't do much. But then they pay people to lobby Congress so that the government can't directly release data. So it's kind of in the back scene. One other thing I'd like to mention is that in my experience using government data sets, there's sort of 10% of the data sets get 90% of the use. We talked about a few of them, NSSO data sets, all those different rounds, NFHS, IHDS, I don't know. Those few data sets, you can list off maybe 5 or 10 of them, are just so enormously useful, not just for external researchers. I mean, like NSSO has key components that are inputs into the Finance Commission. So they're vitally important, not just for research, but for public administration. And I've seen the one thing I think we should be a little bit cautious about is if there's 1,000 data sets being released, paying equal attention to each of those 1,000 data sets. There's going to be a very small few that are going to be much more heavily used. And I think those deserve the lion's share of attention in terms of prepping and making sure they're accessible and easily usable.